Hey, what's going on, people? This is the story of my evil stepmother. Okay, I was 2 years old and my drunk mother attempted to drown me in the bath. My nan had gone to the shop, she came in last minute and apparently I was under the water. My face had gone blue and she had to pull me out the bath and resuscitate me. So obviously my mum being an alcoholic, she wasn't in a fit state to care for me. So my dad and my nan, they went to court together as a team to gain custody to me. The judge at the family court, granted full custody to my dad with the condition that I would see my nan at the weekends. So I was taken away from my mum. I went to live with my dad in West Tilbury Village and his new partner who would become my stepmother. I was 3 years old. My stepmother was 16. She was disowned by her mum and dad for getting with my dad because they believed that she was too young to have a baby. To be with a guy that had a baby already and had been married, so they just washed their hands of her completely. So obviously nobody wanted her. All she ever had from the beginning was me and my dad. So that was the situation from her. I'd describe her as a very insecure person. She didn't like the fact that my dad had a kid. She didn't like the fact that my dad had been married before. These were things that obviously riled her big time. For a 16-year-old girl to have issues with a 3-year-old boy, should have been seen as a red flag from day one, but it was just overlooked. Describe my stepmum: flat boobs, long nose, dry personality, nothing to write home about. My nan and granddad didn't like her very much. They liked my mum, they loved my mum. So when my dad divorced my mum, they wasn't too happy. So he obviously then went on to marry this woman, and like I said, they weren't the biggest fans of her. She was often violent towards me. She enabled the abuse and the violence from my dad. She would say things like, wait till your dad gets home. She would get off on that. She would, like I said, hit me with things. She would put me in the bedroom. Sometimes I'd be there for 3 days for a weekend. Other times I remember being there for 6 weeks through the whole school holidays. That's the kind of abuse they put me through. Now, whenever my dad would physically attack me, my stepmom was always there, grinning, smirking, getting off on it in a twisty kind of way, which made kind of sense, like with the book that she was reading during my childhood. Boy Called It, Child Called It. That was about the boy that got abused by his mum, went to grow on later in life, become a pilot, a man named Dave. And basically that was her go-to book. Now I believe she was getting ideas how to treat me, how to mistreat me, abuse me, manipulate me, gaslight me, and just get away with it basically. A very sick individual in my opinion. Later on in life, when I was still a child though, I pulled her up on it and said, how comes I'm being treated like this, but your kids, my stepbrother and sister aren't? And she said, you're a practice child for them too. Now, I wish I had a witness or I recorded that at that time. Imagine hearing that, a practice child for these two children. Now, to look at these two children, they're nothing special, they're nothing to get hyped up about, they're just two basic run-of-the-mill white children. There's no talent there, there's no super beautifulness there, they're just basic children. So to say I'm a practice child for them two just takes the pee completely in my opinion. She would always force feed me food because I didn't like eating her food. I love my nan's cooking, I love school dinners, but think of them women that can't cook, the ones that can't season a chicken for shit. This is my stepmom to a T. She, like I said, I wouldn't eat the food. It was totally rancid. So she would sit me at the table for hours. I wasn't allowed to leave the table until I ate the food, and then she would force feed it down my throat. That later led on to an eating condition. Okay, this woman was abusive in absolutely every way that I can think of. I was made to wash up. I was made to wash and clean the car. I was made to collect wood for the fire. Anything to basically control and dictate to me, but my stepbrother and sister never had to do anything like this. It was always a big problem to me. She allowed her friend, who was the mother of a Down syndrome daughter, to mock half-chap kids in front of me. Now that was a funny day. I always remember I was very into hip-hop culture from early, so my stepmom had got it into her head, oh yes, everything has to be black with him. And her friend come round and she had just recently had a baby and it was a Down syndrome. And she allowed that woman to mock mixed race kids in front of me. Now imagine thinking that mixed race kids are below Down syndrome children. That's just too funny in itself. Like, crack on with that one. Growing up, the whole family went to Florida and Spain, 2 different occasions, a couple of weeks at a time. and I wasn't invited. I wasn't allowed to go. I had my suitcase packed and I was sent to my nan's. And then my stepmum would come back from these holidays boasting. I always remember this time she was putting up photos around the house of my brother and sister swimming with dolphins, living this great life on holiday, and I was stuck at my nan's. Now, once again, I pulled her up on that. I said, so how comes yous can go on a holiday and I can't? And her reply was, can you imagine you and your dad in the same country? Oh, it won't happen. It's not really the case. It was just more abuse you could add to it. So you could say your kids are doing really well, living a great life, but oh, poor, hard done by Ian. Or if only he behaved himself, eh? He wouldn't have to be at his nan's all the time. It's just abuse. It was just abuse after abuse. Okay, so all the while she was basically treating me like this and thinking she was my mum or something. It turns out my dad was having an affair, 15 years altogether. Sad thing about it was, at the time he actually took me, my stepbrother and sister to Kent, I think it was Chatham at the time, to visit this lady's house. He had built a mini outhouse in the bottom of her garden so he could stay there at the weekend. Another red flag, but my stepmum never seemed to realise this. But so we had this little trip to her house, went back home. I remember telling my stepmum, Dad's got another girlfriend. No, he hasn't. No, he hasn't. He wouldn't do that. I don't believe you. Well, it turned out that was very the case later on in life, wasn't it? Funny. Okay. So, to describe that woman who's having an affair with, really beautiful woman, absolutely stunning. Now, if you were shopping in Harrods, why would you want to go back to Lidl or Aldi? And that was the case with him. So most of the time, my father was in Kent. And I can't blame him. She's a very beautiful woman. And later on, she actually emailed me in life when she had a huge falling out with my dad. And it was scary. She said this email she sent me was like my life story, word for word, telling me how my dad planned to hurt me as a child, disowning my daughter, what he thought of mixed race children and black children, how she was apparently told by him, if your child has a mixed race child, you're to disown your child as well. And she said at that point she had enough completely. Now, it's a very disturbing email. That's later on in the story, obviously. So what happened then, later on in life, I'm still a child, my dad, who was a millionaire at that time, stopped working with my mum, stopped as a family unit, and he made my mum go find a job herself. She then found a job, a bit past her IQ, I think. She got a job in Woolworths, and a little red gnome suit, £90 a week. She had made it, finally, she had made it. Many years later, she was caught by my father on the net planning to leave my dad and her 2 children for a man in the US. Now, this is a very interesting story. My brother and sister don't want to believe this. Me and my dad both know this is true. Okay, my dad logged onto his computer at home and found a net log where my stepmum had been talking to a man in America. Now, this man in America had some money and he was convincing her, leave your husband, leave your children, come and live with America with me. Now, most decent mums, that wouldn't even cross their mind. They're here for their children, they love their children, nothing can come in between their children. Now, my stepmum very much planned to leave them children and my husband, and go and live in the US. Well, then my dad found this log, so wasn't too pleased with it. Didn't want to look like a bit of an idiot in his social circle, so he decided to buy her back her love. A £4,000 boob job and a second-hand £3,000 Fiesta. £7,000 is what it took to buy her silence. Interesting times, interesting times. Okay, along with my father, she disowned my daughter on the day of her birth quite simply due to her being born another race other than white, mixed race. Huge problem in my family, those around in that time know. When my daughter was born, I phoned up my dad and said, guess what, Dad, I've got a baby. He said, I know, and hung up on me. My family weren't allowed to see my daughter. I've always said my dad was the racist. That was always the problem. He didn't want nothing to do with my daughter, one bit. My daughter's mum, on the other hand, said to me, I believe your stepmum's the racist, the way she keeps looking at me. Now, my stepmum isn't the prettiest of women, never has been, okay? So when my daughter's mum had walked into that house, a beautiful mixed race girl, not only she had outranked my dad, I'd outrank my dad with her, the insecurities of this woman towards my daughter's mum was massive. So when my dad disowned her, she followed the path, and so did my brother and sister. But my sister actually got to the point where she threatened to run away to see her niece because she wasn't allowed to see her. Such a sad story. On the day she was born, she was disowned for being born mixed race. That's my family for you. Okay. Many years passed. I obviously suffered from a lot of depression, anxiety, PTSD, trauma from the experiences I've lived. I was told by a doctor to write down my feelings, so I did. I wrote down a lot of my feelings in poetry and hip-hop verses, put them on the internet. 6 months after publishing, I'm arrested. There's a story on the internet about that video there. I was arrested for rap and poetry. Okay, so we're at Crown Court. It's day one, and my stepmum lied on the stand at Crown Court saying hip-hop and rap were responsible for the stuff I wrote. Not the abuse, not everything I'd suffered, the violence growing up, everything at the hands of her and her partner. Nothing to do with that. It had to be that black hip-hop music. Now, my brother was very into rock music. Now, it can't be that white rock music. He was listening to, at one point, Marilyn Manson. Like, okay, that's a decent role model, I suppose, but it's got to be that black music that's the problem. Always the case. I remember when I was younger, both my dad and my stepmom would run into my room at random times, absolutely rip every hip-hop poster off the wall, confiscate all my hip-hop tapes, all my VHSs, recordings of Yo MTV raps, early Tupac and Snoop Dogg footage. It was just like a Fed raid or screws spinning your cell. They would run in and absolutely pull everything. All my lyrics were ripped up in front of me. Absolute abuse because I chose to not play their game, not to want to fit into their family. I was chasing my own dreams. I found something that I felt I belonged with now, and they didn't like that one bit. The abuse I've had to go through for being into hip-hop music and having a mixed-race child alone is absolutely nuts. Okay, so following the 5-day trial at Crown, she took it upon herself to slyly slip her way into my daughter's life whilst buying her mother's silence about the racism. Now this is the bit that absolutely winds me up badly. Okay, so my daughter was disowned at birth for being mixed race. Okay, so I've told the story, my family looked quite bad, I've ended up remanded, I've ended up banned at Crown Court. I'm telling the story, it's kind of backfired big time. I've got an interview with Community Channel on censorship. I've got a lot more interest, my views are going up. One of my verses, recorded verses, has 66,000 views on MySpace at one time. It was I remember one time on MySpace as well, I was the highest played Essex artist at one point. I think that was around 2008 or 9. Interesting time. Okay. So she bought my daughter's mum silence. Obviously my daughter's mum comes from quite a poor background. My stepmom later on in life went to divorce my dad. Long story, but she divorced my dad and took half of his money. She then used that to buy my daughter's mum's silence. Now my daughter's mum's very money orientated, so she's took this money. My stepmom constantly has access to my daughter and daughter's mum. She's on Facebook, she's on other social media sites, she has their phone number, talks to them birthday, Christmas. Now I've had no access to my little girl since 9 years old properly. Okay, now it was all working out for a while, but my daughter's mum likes to play games with me. So it's a case of, while she's got the backing of my dad, my stepmom, who really don't like me, she can have all the access to my little girl, but I can't. I can't know anything about my little girl. Now I find this very, very offensive. She is no relation to my little girl. Let me repeat, she is no relation to my little girl. She's a stepmother, my dad's Joey, a woman who I did not want in my life. Therefore, she's no relation whatsoever to my daughter Alicia, but she likes to believe she's nanny. You are not nanny, love. You are nanny to your daughter's child. You are not nanny to that little girl. You know how many times I've said this to this woman, but the narcissism in her is so high, she believes she has entitlement to absolutely everything. A woman rejected by her mum and dad. A woman rejected by her husband. A woman rejected by her husband's son feels she has the right to my daughter. You just can't make this stuff up. You just cannot make this stuff up, okay? I then went to court later on in life. I needed support. I didn't have the support there to go to family court for rights to see my little girl. I had about 3 sessions up north in Manchester, and it just weren't going where I needed. We was told basically sort it out amongst ourselves before legal aid got involved. I had one more appearance to do, and I said to my stepmom, I need some kind of character reference for that little girl. Oh, I can't do that for you, I'm divorcing your dad will give me less money, blah, 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 blah. It was all this. So I put a little pressure on the woman. I said, I need this to see my daughter. Okay, so she come round, she wrote a letter and she sealed it. Now, I got this letter at the night time. It was the day before court, and I opened this letter and it said something like this. I can't say Ian isn't a good dad, because he loves that little girl. But all these mistakes he keeps making in life keep leading him to the same place. Therefore, he needs some supervision or something like this. Now, what kind of woman would write that? There's nothing wrong with me. Why not just be more honest? Maybe I'm just a product of my stepmom and my dad, maybe? But that'd be honest, wouldn't it? And we all know narcs don't do honesty too well. Okay. I've always been excluded from family funerals and events. That's another thing that winds me up. She's no relation to the Dunn family whatsoever. Never has been. Never has been. Just because my dad married her for a use, like to breed her, give her a couple of kids, make her a housewife, does not make her a Dunn relative. But she takes it upon her shoulders to say, do you know what? Ian's not going to the funeral. Ian's not going to the wedding. Ian's not invited. The insecurities are coming through again here. The thing is, I am a Dunn. I always will be a Dunn. I was born a Dunn. You're not a Dunn. You married a Dunn. You divorced a Dunn. You've got a couple of Dunn kids. You're not a Dunn. Like, I don't know how many times I had to explain this stuff to this woman, but this woman just sitting there going, ho ho, ho ho. Yeah, okay. Trying to pretend she's a class. She ain't. It's a joke, mate. It's an absolute joke. Okay, so many years later, a cousin died. A cousin, Lynn. Now, Lynn was a bit of a cheat. Leading up, she'd actually died of cancer. A few years leading up to the death of dying of cancer, she was cheating on her husband. And so was her other cousin. So she eventually passed, and her husband was at the grave crying away for, oh my wife, she cheated on you, mate, for years. There was no love there. So I took it upon myself to write a verse about it. I wasn't invited, so I took it upon myself to write a verse about this woman. Offended her. I've offended a few people, come to think of it. Like, it is what it is, though. It is what it is. Okay. She refused to help me and my young dog following a burglary. Back in 2012, I was burgled. I went away for a week to South London, and I believe somebody was my friend. I lent him the key to my property. I got a random phone call from police maybe halfway through the week saying, your doors are left open on your property, we've locked them again for you, randomly going past and seen it. Now I thought this was strange, didn't leave my doors open. They said it looks like you've been burgled. Apparently the property got broken into 2 more times and there wasn't any proof of who had been in there. Okay, it was just, how they'd got in there, sorry. So I've eventually gone back to retrieve my bits, what was left, and it turned out the guy I'd lent the key to was the brother of a guy who had now got with my then ex, and they decided to burgle me. So I lost everything, 40 grand worth of stuff, 40 grand. So basically I fell apart. I asked my family for help. They wouldn't house me. Now my stepmum had only just divorced my dad for X amount of money. My dad was a millionaire. And I was forced to live in a tent for 6 months just to keep my dog. I wouldn't go to a hostel and give up my dog. I love my dog more than any human being on this earth. I love my dog more than any family member. I love my dog. He's my baby, okay? So I chose to keep that. He's never done anything wrong with me. I chose to keep him. So no family would help me. My stepmom just got £10,000 new windows, but couldn't offer a few £100 to help house me. So me and my dog spent 6 months in a tent. It was hard, very hard. It's not the first time I've been homeless. If any time I ask my family for help during homelessness, it's just lead me to it. The way they see it, if I'm in prison, I'm out the way, I'm dead, I'm a junkie, alcoholic or something, mentally messed up, I'm not a threat to them, they'll grind me down and I can't tell the truth. Well, this is what this video is for. Keep telling the truth. Okay. Yeah, so my stepmom divorced my dad, took X amount of his money, led to him having 2 strokes or 2 heart attacks, karma maybe. Next bit of the story. She loves to leave public comments on my daughter's mum's page, on my daughter's social media, on my daughter's social media pages. Lovely family Vicky, lovely gorgeous Alicia, always comments that she couldn't have given me back in the day when Vicky was my daughter's mum. No comments like that, or how great Alicia was, or how great we were as a family. But she leaves them publicly to try and hurt and humiliate me even more. Now, I find this still pathetic. She's not this woman's granddaughter. We can all pick up a cup off the floor and say this cup is mine. It don't make that cup yours, okay? The woman is totally warped in the head, okay? So I'll let her buy the love of my daughter, but eventually my daughter will see the truth, and that'll be the end of this woman and my daughter's relationship, basically. So it is what it is. A lot more to this story. she posted stuff on Facebook. I posted stuff on Facebook explaining about, basically I built up courage and I'd gone to Essex Police and explained the abuse I'd lived as a child, speaking on some other things that occurred that I don't really want to go into in this video. I believed I was listened to by Essex Police, and at the end of the interview they said to me, well, this wouldn't have happened if you didn't threaten to burn your dad's house down. Now, I've never threatened to burn my dad's house down. And they said, but you did. I said, no, I didn't. They said, well, you was put in prison for it. Like I said this before, this wasn't mentioned in court, this wasn't mentioned by a solicitor, this wasn't mentioned anywhere. Okay, so all it takes is somebody to say, oh yes, he threatened to burn my house down. And that's the cause of, what, 35 years of abuse, is it? Okay, so like, there's a lot more to this story. I will go deeper into these stories at a later date. But if Essex Police are watching this, feel free to leave in the comments why this was enabled. Okay, 37 years of constant games, manipulation, abuse, gaslighting, taking anything away from me I love, having my taking my rap out of my room as a kid, I couldn't have it, banning me at Crown Court so I couldn't rap, they couldn't have it, denying me of my mixed race girl, disowning her and then taking her on as their own. Now, call this what you want to call this, but this is clearly abuse, okay? Now, I'm not afraid to tell people what happened to me. I'm not ashamed. These people should be very ashamed, and so should their enablers. Mr. Dunn.